Hey, Bo, what's going on?
Good to see you.
Howard, what's going on?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Buena di manita. I had this ready. I messed it up. Wait, I'm gonna get it. Buena di minata, George.
Buona di minata, man.
Hi, Tommy. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Coach Drew, what's going on?
How's it going? I'm glad we got to finally do this.
Coach Buckner, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Hey, Nick, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing, John? Nice seeing you again.
Hi, Tommy, what's going on?
Hey, John. How are you, man?
AJ Slate, what's going on?
Hi, how are you?
Rick, what's going on?
Everything's great, John. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Really excited to have you on. Obviously, this episode's been a while in the making. It was awesome meeting you a few years ago at the Big Man Camp, and obviously getting to talk to you now on the show is awesome.
It's about damn time.
Once you got to that point, when did Bone Collector become a thing, and that kind of became your persona?
The early 2000s again. One of my friends, my backcourt teammate, his name was David Seals. He noticed that the paramedics would come into every game, my first 5 games, because people was getting hurt. And he called me in like 3 in the morning, and I thought he wanted to work out, but he called me to tell me, yo, I got a dope name for you, The Bone Collector. And I was like, man, that's a movie with Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie. I don't want to do that. And he was like, no, I'm telling you, you're making people fall and get hurt. You're collecting their bones. So when we went to the park, he told the announcer to call me that. And I'll never forget, I played a game against Jamal Tinsley, who at the time was playing for the Indiana Pacers. Jay-Z brought a bunch of guys out. And I remember stealing the ball and dribbling down court. And I just remember the announcer saying my name over and over and over again. And it kind of went from there. And he was like singing it with some sort of melody. So the whole crowd was saying it. And their energy made me just take my game to a whole nother level. And from that moment, I believe my name spread like wildfire through New York, because before social media, it was mostly word of mouth. And I would go everywhere and I would hear my name all over the place. And it was a good feeling. And it's even more amazing to still be able to do it to this day.
Being a beat writer is a lot about showing up. It's about just being there and being present, observing, doing what Shaq used to tell us. This was usually in a different context, but Shaq used to love saying, write what you see, brother. Now, usually meant write what you see, usually meant write what you see, which is that Kobe's not passing me the ball enough, or write what you see, which is that the referees weren't calling all the fouls against me. But I think of that quote a lot, because I think it's a perfectly distilled, simplified, but very accurate version of what the job description is. Like, that's being a reporter. Write what you see. There's a little more to it than that, but go out there, cover a game, cover a practice, cover whatever, cover a protest, cover anything. It's a lot of observation and then contextualizing that observation.
Like, I mean, it's just make it so simple with the write what you see, and your Shaq impression was actually pretty spot on. I think if our listeners just hear that,
I've had 23 years to work on it.
Yeah, that's great. So while you're covering the Lakers for those 7 years, from 97 to 2004, what were you seeing?
What was I seeing?
You're seeing a lot. You're seeing a lot of championships.
Yeah. I mean, listen, John, I had no idea what I was getting into, to be honest. I mean, I did and I didn't. Shaq was already a larger than life figure, but he'd been in LA for 1 year and he had some injury issues, knee issues that first season. Kobe was 1 year in when I started covering them, but he's still, he's 19, I think, at the time that I meet him. And, he's 1 year in, he's had, kind of a rocky rookie season. They've just gotten Rick Fox, or he got there, I think, within the past year. Like, this team was really unformed. I really didn't know. I mean, there's not a chance in the world that anybody at that time, and certainly not me, but even more experienced people could have thought this team was going to become the dynasty that it did. There was a lot of unknown there, and nobody was sure that Kobe was going to become what he did. The outline was there, the possibilities were there, but nobody knew that.
Fresh off of shooting 4 air balls in a playoff game.
Against the Jazz. Yeah. And was really skinny still. And, and some of his more negative traits were the most prominent ones at that time, pretty brash, cocky, overconfident, and hadn't earned it yet. And, was really still just finding his way. And even my first year covering them, 97, 98, and into the lockout season of '99, he was still kind of trying to find his way. Things really didn't start to solidify until Phil Jackson got there for that 99-2000 year. And of course they win the first of 3 titles then. But I learned a lot covering that team about not just basketball, but just, team dynamics, obviously, because the Shaq and Kobe dynamic was so fraught. Guys like Rick Fox and Robert Horry, Derek Fisher, though he was younger than those guys, Brian Shaw, Ron Harper, Horace Grant, like all these guys who came through, the veterans were like so incredible in terms of their willingness to share their insights about the game, about how team dynamics work, explaining whatever was going on with them at the time. And it just kind of gave me, I think, a great basketball education. And Phil Jackson too, covering that team meant talking to him almost every day for 5 straight years, shoot arounds, pregame, postgame practices. And I think a lot of my own kind of, I don't know how to, I guess, value system, like the things that I like about basketball or certain teams, I think often come back to the things that Phil Jackson preached. Like, I love this current Miami Heat team that's in the finals because of how selfless they are and the ball and player movement. And I think a lot of that is my bias coming from listening to Phil Jackson beat that drum for 5 years every day about, it's not that Miami's not running the triangle offense, but to me, any offense that also values ball and player movement and a more egalitarian approach. And yeah, there's always a time when it's time for Michael to take over or Kobe to take over, or LeBron to take over, or whoever. But the systems that are set up, and the Warriors were like this too the last several years under Steve Kerr. I think a lot of that I could trace back to those early years of covering the Lakers, where like that was what set a lot of my own impressions of what I think, great basketball should look like. And again, it's set during that time as opposed to earlier, because I wasn't watching a ton of Warrior games back in the day as a kid growing up in the Bay Area because they sucked. Also, those games probably weren't on TV that much because the NBA wasn't on that much, and there was no such thing as League Pass or satellite TV back in my day because I'm old.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, when you came into the league, and they're all games where you're playing against some of the, in the '90s, some of the best big men of all time, right? And there's no standing in place or hiding from a guy like Shaq or Hakeem or David Robinson and stuff like that.
Look, NBA is the top of the top league in basketball in the world, and NBA at that time was around 400 some players. Right now it's around 500 players they play right now. But to play in NBA, you have to be special. You cannot be just a basketball player. You have to have something special to play in NBA. And these special players, they are around 500 players.
Yeah, out of the millions in the world. Yeah.
Yes, it's easy. Sometimes it's easy to become an NBA player, and it's very hard to stay NBA player.
Yep.
It's very hard to become an NBA player because you have to have a lot of tools, and you have to be extremely special.
Of course, the NBA is a business, and it moves at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's super hard to kind of keep all that into play. So now, as a general manager, what's the kind of relationship like? Has it changed at all with doing work to make the GM's life easier? You're now in that position to see everything and make that decision. Has that been a real big change for you?
Not really. I'm a very collaborative person. I've surrounded myself with an unbelievable staff, with Brett Greenberg, who's one of the very best cap people in the NBA, but one of the best people in the NBA. He's a wonderful person. Frank Ross on the college side is our vice president of college personnel. Johnny Rogers on the pro side, vice president of pro personnel. And we brought back some familiar faces with Antoine Jameson on the pro side. Tony DeLeo still, those two are directors of scouting for the college side, for the pro side, and they are a fantastic group. We have wonderful scouts on the pro side and on the college side as well. And then we have fantastic basketball operations assistants, the support staff of Tion Watson, Alec Arnold, Greg Kershaw, and Sam Kaplan, you hate naming names because you'll leave somebody out, but our staff they're just such servant leaders. It really makes me feel great. I don't feel ever that I'm isolated or one person on top of everybody else. We're just a very collaborative group.
That's so great. And then from the business side, what started the transition to Pure Sweat? Like, when did you think of the idea, the name? When did that all kind of fall into place for you?
To be honest with you, I had to start Pure Sweat because I was a recruitable athlete and you weren't allowed to use your name and image to promote any products or services. So I had to come up with a name, which actually was great for me to actually start, branding. And my high school coach and I both came up with Pure Sweat just because we were kind of trying to embody everything that we loved. We were like, we love the purity of the game when it's at its truest form. Just like the love of the game, we think that's lost in so many cases, and so many people forget why they started playing. So that's where Pure from Pure Sweat comes from, the purity of the game, the pure love of the game. And then Sweat, we think the only way to maximize your potential is put in a ton of countless hours. I always think of the image of a champion, someone bent over, dripping in sweat at the point of exhaustion when no one else is watching. That's where Sweat comes from. We hammered those together and said, hey, if you keep the pure love of the game alive and you work your butt off, which is going to result in a ton of, sweat, then you're going to get results. And so that's where Pure Sweat came from, and that's what it stands for.
While you're with the Rockets, obviously, with Coach JB Biggerstaff on staff, we kind of mentioned before about kind of how relationships are so vital in the NBA landscape. What did that relationship kind of look like, and how did it kind of progress to where now you're with the Cavs and doing all the cool things there?
Man, if you talk about the Minnesota, we go all the way back to Minnesota. JB was my rebounding coach, and he was a guy that worked me out. He was a guy that watched film with me while I was in Minnesota, and it was one of those relationships where we just developed that bond. We hung out off the court. We ate lunch, we ate dinner. It's just one of those things with player-coach relationship that normally doesn't happen, to be quite honest with you. And, he took me on his wing as far as that as a coach player. And then I kind of took him on his wing because he's younger than me, has been, a big brother. He has a couple big brothers, but we was together so much that we became brothers. And then we both went to Houston with Mikal because of our Minnesota connections. One of those deals where Mac only had 2 hires. The management hired the other guys. And me and JB was those guys. We was Mac's guys. And we just spent so much time together in Houston trying to develop the defense. Then we got on the offensive side and tried to develop the offense. And then when they fired Kevin McHale, he became head coach. And it's just like he leaned on me for so much that we developed that bond of being even closer. And then he got the Memphis job. We did the same thing. And now here in Cleveland, we're doing the same thing, trying to, develop a culture of winning, a standard of winning, and have consistent winning regardless of who's in the locker room. We expect to win.
So you obviously have been able to do something with it, but the process wasn't always easy, and there's a lot of grinding that has to go into it, right? In your early 20s. I'm curious, kind of going from being a geography major to the kind of what you called it before. I've heard you call it the basketball camp game, right? Where you're working at all these different camps. Can you kind of talk about that transition for you in terms of saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to go all in on this and just go to all these camps and meet as many people as I can, coach all these different people and take up all those skills. Can you kind of talk about that process for you?
Yeah, so I was actually teaching skiing in Colorado, and I was working at a resort. This was a year after I graduated college. I have always wanted to do that my whole life. I was in the middle of nowhere in Colorado. It was pretty fun. I was just kept on coming back to basketball, and it's just like, that is what I wanted to do. It's like, I just got to try. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I was pretty naive to think I could just go to the Bay Area and make it work. But that's what I was going to do. Is I'm going to go to the Bay Area. I'm going to work for the Warriors. I'm going to work for Stanford or something. And if someone told me they're going to do that now, I'd be like, you're absolutely crazy. But I think you kind of have to be a little crazy. Geography at that point wasn't too much in my mind at that point. But I went to the Bay Area. I lived my aunt and uncle. They lived in San Francisco. And then my college roommate, he's in Burlingame, just south of San Francisco. So I kind of was staying between their 2 places, worked basketball camps at all the local universities. So I gained a lot of experience. I really had no basketball experience, similar to Nick Reich's story. When he was on our last class, he talked about how he had no experience. He was just like, I want to work in basketball. It's kind of what you have to do. And then, so then I worked the year and a half at Stanford. I learned a ton, but all I did was work. I worked around the clock, it was like basically living in the locker room. That's where I think geography took over. I felt like I wasn't really living. I was working, and I wanted to like live again and do what my passion is. So Australia has this 1-year work visa. So it's really easy just to move to Australia. You don't have to go through all this paperwork. You can just like buy it. You can move to Australia. Did that. And I wanted to work in basketball still. That was still the plan. But if I didn't, I was kind of doing my other passion of seeing the world, and not just seeing as a tourist, but kind of living like a different culture. So it's 2 birds with 1 stone. And I couldn't suggest Australia enough, either as a visitor or if someone wanted to do that 1-year work holiday visa. Couldn't suggest it enough.
The funniest thing happened with you that I saw where you're on a basketball without borders trip with someone that would end up being your former boss. So can you talk to us a little about that, about how networking maybe really helped kickstart your career there, and maybe how you really did that?
Yeah, no, and I think it actually speaks to how serendipitous and how crazy life sometimes is. When I first joined NBA in London, I had a chance to go to Moscow, and that's where the Basketball Without Borders camp was taking place. And the reason why I actually ended up going to Moscow was because I spoke Russian, because I took Russian in college. Now I'm Lithuanian, I speak Russian kind of, because growing up with a bunch of Russians kind of around. But I ended up taking Russian classes in college as well. And when I joined NBA London, the camp was actually 3 weeks later, and it's a little more rare for a newcomer to join to go to a BWB camp immediately. But my boss was like, "Hey, you speak Russian? That's important because we're going to Moscow and we're going to be talking to meeting up with a bunch of companies, because at that point we were selling media rights to various TV channels in Europe." So my boss was like, "Hey, because you speak Russian, let's go." And that's where I met Tim Connolly. I knew Arturas, of course, and Arturas was there too. And that trip completely changed my, the trajectory of my professional life, because Tim, a year later, offered me the job with the Nuggets. So when you really think about it, the fact that I decided to take that Russian class in college ended up like landing me a job here with the Nuggets. You never know what skill is going to take you somewhere. It may seem completely irrelevant, it may seem completely useless, and then lo and behold, sometime that particular thing is going to propel you. So it makes it harder because you don't know what to focus on. But in other ways, it's more exciting because anything can land you anywhere. So that's my own thing. If I was focusing on a specific thing and not take the Russian class, I would not be with the Nuggets right now, most likely. So yeah, it was a crazy story. Also speaks to the fact that, hey, you have to meet people, and sometimes it happens by accident. And all you can do is just put on the best face you can, which you should do 100% of your time anyway. And just treat people with respect, and then and the good things will happen to you.
So important. And I mean, it kind of brings us back. One of the biggest things you're doing now, obviously, with the Slate House, I want to hear about, right now you're kind of getting into that entrepreneur space. What can you kind of tell us what that's been like, and explain what the Slate House is?
Yeah, so I won't lie to you. I definitely didn't have the business savvy, mind going into it. I don't really know much about business, but again, reached out, found the contacts and the network that could help me piece that together. So I started the Slate House to do like digital media, brand management for athletes, for teams, events, just kind of on a concierge basis. So trying to be, as helpful and authentic for whoever I'm working with, and give them the opportunity to really showcase their stories or their ideas, whatever it may be, in the most genuine way possible, so that it really reflects them and not just, another cookie cutter idea that, we're just kind of pushing out, where I really want to make sure that it reflects them and that they're really happy with it first and foremost.
That's so huge, and make sure that all happens. I'm curious, maybe, what kind of obstacles did you face, right, building your own brand in that sense? I'm sure, right, it wasn't easy. You didn't wake up one morning and say, "Hey, I'm going to start this company," right? There must have been so much leading up to that.
Honestly, there's a lot less leading up to it than I think I should have done. I just kind of got to the point where I was like, I know what I bring to the table. I know my skills. I know that, I have somewhat of a network and a reputation for, being hardworking and being in sports that, I can kind of rely on, but it's definitely not the backbone of it. I think it's going to be something I'm going to have to continue to work on. But for me, it was about getting the foundation of the business set up so that, all of my I's are dotted, my T's are crossed, so that when I do go in to work with people, all of that stuff is taken care of. The invoicing and all that stuff is real easy. And then I just really knew that what I wanted to do was going to really rely on how I like to help people, and my approach to it, and being really athlete forward or team forward, whatever that may be, and keeping that at the forefront. And it all kind of just fell together after that. But, it hasn't been that long, and there's going to be a lot of, roads ahead where I have to keep pushing through, finding more clients. And then the other big thing is it's not really like something that exists. So there's definitely like marketing agencies, there's creatives that you can hire for videography or for graphics and stuff. And I'm kind of covering all of that, as well as, outsourcing when necessary. I don't claim to be able to do everything. So, building that Rolodex of really good photographers and videographers that I can set up for workout photo shoots and stuff like that, different projects. But, really trying to get all of that organized, I think has been, something to work on as well.
Outsourcing, delegating, those are super important skills. But I think you're selling yourself short a little bit because you do have so many skills in this industry, right? And our listeners, if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go back and listen to it because they'll obviously hear the breakdown of all this stuff. But can you kind of give us a little bit of a recap of maybe what all, because there's so many of them and there's so many different roles you had leading up to where you are now. What were some of those skills you picked up that have been, I would imagine, invaluable to you?
Yeah, I mean, been through kind of it all. So I went to school for journalism. So the general writing, PR, all that kind of stuff, media training is there. And then I've done play-by-play, I've done videography for news, sports, I've done graphic design, social media management. What else? I don't even know. I think at some point I've probably touched everything a little bit, did some sideline reporting. And so I think those give me really good perspectives on how to work with other people, what type of things I can ask of photographers so that I'm not, asking them for too much or things that just aren't possible. And also like deadlines. I know not to like ask for a video to be edited within like 2 hours. Like there's realistic expectations because I've been in that position and I know how to edit videos. So I think that's kind of the biggest advantage of the skills is not necessarily knowing how to do all of them, but it helps me be a better team player.
And you spoke about this at the camp. I alluded to it earlier, the whole story about what the orange ball could do for you, right? And what it kind of allowed you to do, right? Taking full, obviously you had to work really hard for it, but like you kind of told us, it can get you a house, it can get you a super hot girlfriend, it can get you the nicest car, right? But
I ain't tell you it was a super hot girlfriend. The ladies do be looking at that money, son.
But none of those things can get you good at dribbling and shooting that orange ball. You could take you overseas. It could show you the world. The orange ball could do so much for you. I mean, we haven't even touched on your coaching career and all that other stuff. But I mean, what has that orange ball maybe allowed you to do? And how's it changed your life?
That orange ball is a beast, man. And you know what? I never really explained. A lot of times you see that orange ball, it opens up the door. That's one first and foremost. But here's the thing, John. Those things on the side, the stripes, the grooves, that's your veins, that's the blood. And you got to figure start somewhere. You have that heart as we have in our bodies, but that vein goes further. It's endless. It's like it just in a ball, in that circular motion, the ball just keeps going round and round and round and round. And what it does, it opens up opportunities. It may not stop on what you think about, but for me, it opened up the door for announcing, opened up the door for community services, still working with a great organization, still being involved in the association as the NBA. It keeps me relevant, but it also, it feeds me. It helps my family. So these are the things, it gives me opportunities that basketball, man, them veins, it just keeps going and it keeps pouring out. So it opens up the doors for people trying to say, okay, I want to be a basketball player. That's all well and good. That's part of the story. But the best part of the story is the end of the story. You want to start something, but at the end, you want to finish at a high level. So it's not even, it's the climax. It's the, okay, let's walk into the sunlight and let's just enjoy what we're doing. But every day, that ball opens up so many doors of relationships, opportunities, things that open up the door to promote yourself. That's what I like about, that basketball is a beast.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.